This is going to be a video on engine back pressure testing. Back pressure testing is important. Every engine has to have a little bit of back pressure, and so we need to be able to test it, see if the exhaust is restricted or whatever the case may be. There's a couple of different ways that I'm going to show you how to do this, and we'll go ahead and get started. First, I want to show you the tools that you will need in order to do a back pressure test. So the tools that I have are, first of all, if you have access to it, you can get a back pressure gauge. Now, the back pressure gauge is going to be something similar to this. It measures in inches of water, so it's very, very small pressure. And it comes as a kit, usually, that have these adapters that you can actually install into the exhaust. And I'll show you in a minute where I've installed one in our trainer engine exhaust. And then it also comes with adapters like this one here that will go in place of the oxygen sensor. So you take the oxygen sensor out, you screw this in, and then you can hook up your gauge to the adapter and measure the back pressure. Or if you don't have access to these tools, all you really need is a 3x5 card, and you'll be able to do a reasonable back pressure test to see whether or not there's a misfire or something like that going on in the car. So let's take a look at this engine down here. This little piece right here, that screw in the tailpipe, is where I've installed the adapter for the back pressure testing. And so that's where we're going to hook up the gauge to do the back pressure test. Okay, I've removed the screw and I'm going to install the adapter. Now, if you notice on this adapter, the threads are very, very small on it. So when you install an adapter like this, you need to make sure that you are very careful and don't over torque it. The adapter is made out of brass, and that is a very small screw adapter to it, and you can easily over torque it and break it, and then it's difficult to get out. So what we're going to do is we're just going to screw it into the exhaust, and really hand tight is all it really needs to be, and that'll be tight enough that we can actually get a reading on it. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to hook up the back pressure gauge, and so it's just a little bayonet fitting that goes on there like that. And here's our back pressure gauge. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to start the engine up, and we're going to check the back pressure on this engine. Okay, if you notice, the back pressure didn't move a whole lot. Doesn't need to be a whole bunch of back pressure. As long as you're within the green here, you should be okay. And if you notice on our last gauge reading, the needle was fluctuating quite a bit, and that was because I had a misfire set in the engine. So I have fixed the misfire, and we'll be able to see what the back pressure looks like now with no misfire. Notice the needle wasn't moving at all. We're going to take a look at the back pressure gauge while I rev the engine up a little bit, and you can see the back pressure actually moving. See, we're just off the zero now, so we're not quite at 1 pound. Good back pressure is usually less than 3 pounds pressure. So if you notice on the gauge here, it comes up to 3 and then it turns red over there. So you want to make sure that you're less than 3 pounds, and we didn't even get up to 1.25 pounds, so that's actually okay on this engine. Okay, we'll say that we don't have the fancy back pressure gauge. We're working at home. We want to do a back pressure test with just a 3x5 card. The 3x5 card, what you're going to do is you're going to start the engine, and you're going to place the card right up against the tailpipe, And the card will puff out every time the piston fires. So each one of the pistons, so it'll tap back and forth like this. But if the engine's running okay, it'll be just kind of an even light tapping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it looks like without a misfire, and then we're going to put a misfire in the engine and see what it looks like then. So I'm going to start the engine. We're going to place the 3x5 card. You notice we got a pretty good misfire right there. So we already have a misfire in this engine. And if you remember from yesterday, or from the last video I did, we did have one cylinder that wasn't contributing in the power balance test. So that makes sense that this one would have a misfire. Let's go find an exhaust that doesn't have a misfire. For convenience sake, we're just going to look at my motorcycle. So we'll look at the motorcycle exhaust here. I'm going to start the engine, and then I'll put the 3x5 card in front of the exhaust. Engine's running. Put the 3x5 card up here. You notice how it just pushes out. There's very little flutter on it. You can still see where the engine or the pistons are going up and down, that little flutter, but it's nothing like that engine in the classroom was. So that gives you a good indication right there that all the cylinders are firing in this engine. So that concludes engine back pressure test. So again, to recap, the purpose of a back pressure test is to make sure that you don't have a clogged engine, or clogged exhaust, I should say, and also to make sure that you don't have any misfires and that all cylinders are contributing.